Welcome back to Middlesex Moments, coming to you from Middlesex Community College. I'm Steve Minkler, and joining me today is Dr. Rebecca Loew, who is a professor of social and behavioral sciences at Middlesex Community College. Thanks for joining me, Rebecca.
Oh, thank you for inviting me, Steve. Nice to see you.
Now, Rebecca, if you don't mind, just reintroduce yourself to our audience. I know you've been a guest on this program before, but tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to Middlesex.
Oh, I'd be happy to say a little bit about myself and how I got connected to Middlesex. Where to begin? I guess with my relationship with the college, I started teaching part-time back in 2005, and I've been a full-time faculty member since 2012. My background did not necessarily determined that I would end up as a college professor, although it was always an option. My training my undergraduate work was in sociology, and my intellectual juices were really energized through some of my coursework there. I did most of my focus on social theory, and critical theory in particular really resonated with me. And these important questions around looking at society as it is and asking questions about how society ought to be. So this sort of normative dimension, where are we in terms of social conditions and people's situation and circumstances and opportunities, and where do we aspire to be as a society? And if where we are and where we, would like to be are, kind of close together, then we might just be very satisfied. But often, and certainly was the case in my youth and has continued to be, I think we can do better. I think where we aspire to be as a people, as a society here and many countries, falls short of what we're capable of. And so we have a number of social problems and social conditions and that are problematic for many people. We aspire to be fair, and then some of our social institutions seem to be more fair for some groups and less fair for others. And people struggle, and I, as a young person and still to this day, wonder why and ought that to be. So this idealism, which I think is a great thing, about making the world better, has always been with me from a young age. And so from my undergraduate work, I moved forward, did some more graduate work, and with an aspiration to working on changing social conditions. And how do you do that? Well, many different ways. I studied public policy, and I'm especially interested in health and aging policy. And so got a bunch of tools that I needed, not only about the content of those areas, but tools to conduct research. And so what I envisioned for myself was to possibly end up in academia where I could do research, or to work with either a public or private organization looking at implementing programs or policies to bring about social change, and perhaps playing a role in terms of evaluating those efforts to move us closer to where we ought to be. And so that work may have landed me in academia, but there were a lot of other possibilities as well. And I did some work for a hospital association, some research and policy paper preparation. I did a lot of writing for a large health policy foundation. And I eventually did end up on faculty in a graduate school of social work. And you know what? I was not so satisfied there.
Okay.
So I eventually left, and did so when my second child was born. So, that pull that women and men, but especially women, still feel about trying to be the kind of parent you want to be, and also the kind of worker in paid employment that you want to be, is a challenge. So for me, it was a good time to take a step back from that full-time work, focus on family. I still did some work part-time. and just rethink things. So I was thinking of pivoting away from academia. As I said, it was kind of,
Mhm.
I wasn't so satisfied with the experience. When I met one of our faculty who has since retired at the college, and she said, listen, I need someone to teach sociology of aging course. And this is the day and time, and could you do it for me? And I was not fast on my feet to think of a reason to say no. It was available, so I said, all right, I'll give it a try. And you know what? I loved it. I was so surprised. I don't know why I was so surprised, possibly because of my previous experience, but I just fell in love with teaching at the college. It did not feel like work. It was just exciting, rewarding, challenging, um, interesting. And I do like to be interested,
Mhm.
very interesting. And I just thought, wow, I'm glad I was open to new experience because it just clicked. It just has been a great fit for me. So I started in 2005, and I was fortunate to, be asked back and have opportunities to continue teaching as a part-timer. It worked out great for me because my kids were quite young still, three of them at that point. And when the full-time position was available and I applied for it, and it was one of the happiest days of my professional life when I got that call, I think, from you, Steve.
Okay, yeah.
So I love my work. I love working at the community college. It's very interesting. It's quite challenging, and it's very rewarding. Again, circling back to where I started, I view teaching as an opportunity to change people's consciousness and to give them tools that are, you can lose everything in the world, you can't lose your education. That is something that you always have with you. And to feel that, you maybe are making the world or each individual a little bit better off by, sharing my passion for teaching and my field, and maybe giving them tools to understand their world, and also make a positive impact on it, changing consciousness of our students, and in turn, I am changed as well. It's just a great place, and I'm very grateful to be on faculty.
Well, we're so happy you said yes first for the part-time assignment, but then for the full-time as well.
Yeah.
And I think someone with your background and scholarship and your professional interest to work at a community college where teaching is really sort of our primary
Yes.
mission.
Yeah.
Universities is typically more where research occurs, but it doesn't mean research does not happen at a community
Right.
college.
Exactly.
So if you can talk a little about some of the ways that you've gotten your students engaged with our community, you call it community engaged learning, and a lot of the ways that you've brought that to the classroom and have raised the bar for scholarship at Middlesex Community College.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Well, I think one of my goals as a teacher is to make the material meaningful and relevant for the students. So they're not just, okay, this is, I got to learn what a social institution is, and, for the test and whatever, but for it to have meaning, for them to connect and really sort of grab on and say, okay, this is how this applies to my life, and this is why it's important, this idea within sociology. And so one of the ways in which we can do that is by asking the students to use this knowledge that they gain, in the classroom and in the reading, et cetera. And so working so getting some professional development so that I learned more about models of community engaged learning through Campus Compact and other venues. I became more familiar with an approach to teaching that is really appealing to me and really makes a lot of sense with my view of the world of not just understanding, but trying to engage with it to bring about some change. So my students, I've incorporated them in a number of different projects, depending on the course. Starting out with the sociology of the family course that I teach just about every semester, we worked with some of the residents at Covenant Village. It's now called Covenant Living of Cromwell, which is an older adult community, and asking some of those residents to come in and talk about their family history. So my students in that course have to imagine at the end of the course have to write a paper in which they imagine they're quite old and they're writing their memoir and they're writing the chapter on their family life. And so I thought, well, my students have to imagine incorporating all the course content. They have to imagine what their life would be like, and analyzing choices. Did they get married? Why not? Et cetera, timing, work roles, et cetera. Why don't I bring in people who are older and who have actually lived, many years and can reflect in a meaningful way. I work with the panelists that I bring in, and we look at the syllabus and the course material and have conversations so that they're prepared, so that their thinking is sociological and they can model sort of, how to sort of have that sociological imagination where you're stepping back and looking at your life and seeing, sort of these social patterns and the influence of your generation or moments in history on, how your life move forward, your family life move forward. So first time I did this work, I, envisioned bringing the panel in and everyone having an enjoyable and enlightening time, and that would be it. But at the end of the class, everyone turned to me and said, "We are not done, right? We we want to talk more. We have more questions." And the residents said, "Well, we want to see how the papers turned out." So we're like, not done. We got to keep going. And so I said, "Okay, we'll make it happen." And I had my students go back at the end of the semester and actually present their work to the residents at Covenant Living, and they got a lot of support. It was, I think, for many of them, like, being in a room full of grandparents, just thinking what your work is just supportive and wanting to, add comments to make you think and, realize you're doing good work as a student and aspiring to, get your education. So it was very rewarding on both ends, as we want community engaged learning to be not just only to serve the students, but to serve the community as well. And so I've used that model a number of times and worked in other courses as well. My public health course has put on a public health fair for our campus community. My students arranged to bring in various members of the broader community, Middletown and surrounding areas, who were working in an area, a health priority that they had identified and researched. And so partnered with somebody from the community, for instance, on breast cancer education and detection, and set up a booth, if you will, a table at our fair. And we had invited the campus to come in and learn about these health issues, and we connected these issues to the Healthy People at that time 2020 report identifying public health priorities.
Rebecca, it's time for us to take a quick break, and when we come back, I look forward to hearing more about community engaged learning and about a topic that you'll be pursuing as part of a sabbatical project on loneliness among community college students. You're listening to Middlesex Moments, coming to you from Middlesex Community College. Welcome back to Middlesex Moments, coming to you from Middlesex Community College. I'm Steve Minkler, and I've been chatting with Dr. Rebecca Loew, who is a professor of social and behavioral sciences at Middlesex Community College. Before the break, we were talking about community engaged learning and how Dr. Loew has brought the community into the classroom and in the work she does with her students. And Rebecca, you are on several boards and you're involved with several agencies in the community. And talk a little bit about how that really connects with your work as a professor at the college, and how that brings kind of the topics that you talk about in sociology classes and other classes you teach. It really brings those to life in the classroom.
Oh, good question. So I have served and serve on several community boards. Before starting at Middlesex, I was on the board of Haddam Killingworth Youth and Family Services. I live in Killingworth and probably served on that board for about 10 years. And when we moved to the community, that was just a really great way to get an idea of the issues that are going on within the community among various age groups, especially young people and school age folks. but also start to see the networks and connections that are being made out of that organization with other community partners and various resources and who's doing what kinds of work, within, say, public health or social services, who's working on, dealing with, hunger and unmet needs for families who are quite economically vulnerable or families that have, abusive situations going on. So, you can look at formally, in a directory, what services are available in agencies, and that's a helpful start, but it's a qualitatively different kind of way of gathering information when you work with individuals and the community and that network that goes on through board meetings and activities that are sponsored through community organizations, and having the face-to-face with some of the players and leaders in working to deal with all aspects of our broad community life. So I started out youth and family services, and have been involved with other organizations, and just finishing up my tenure on the board of the Albritton Center at Wesleyan. And that's been wonderful to learn more about what goes on at Wesleyan and the resources and staff and organizations that are involved there, and some of the cutting edge models that Wesleyan has brought in to do some of the work of that community board. And their great willingness to partner with us at Middlesex, and that's something that I plan to do when we, I can say a little bit more about in terms of my sabbatical project, but also to work with other people on the board and hear about projects and needs and goals that other entities within our larger community are pursuing or working on, and how we can collaborate together. That's very helpful in terms of getting a landscape of the specific problems or challenges in our community and the efforts that are being made to address some of those. And sometimes that results in, finding someone to be a great guest speaker, to talk about, family poverty in Middletown, and to bring them into the classroom, or to work with a club that I'm advising to maybe have a community event on campus where we can bring more people in. So it's not only thinking about how the community can serve our students, but also how we as a college can serve our community as well. And so that back and forth between knowing folks and having a better sense of some of the challenges and work in our community, and then how we as a college can be of service, continue to be of service to our community.
That's fantastic. And I know you've done so much work to make those connections between the college and the community and the agencies around us be so much stronger. And I think model the way for our students is we want them to be full participants in our communities as well. So,
Right.
So I found it very intriguing to see a proposal that you submitted last November, prior to COVID changing the world for us, for a sabbatical leave. And for our listeners who don't know, sabbatical leave is common in academia for professors and administrators to take a paid leave from employment in order to study a topic of interest to the person, but also that could benefit their institution. And so, Rebecca, your proposal that you submitted last November talked about studying loneliness among community college students. And everything we've talked about so far has been about connecting and doing work together and all this. Why did this appeal to you, the whole subject of loneliness? How did that come about?
Well, I think it was spring of 2017, and I literally was about to walk into, I think, my second meeting with my public health students, and I saw an article that England had just established a ministry on loneliness. So, we would say a department in the federal government. In the UK, it's a ministry to tackle loneliness. And that just fascinated me. The phenomenon of loneliness being looked at as a public health problem, one requiring, resources and national attention. Sort of, I had missed that somehow, but I wanted to know more. So that's when it all started. And this phenomenon of loneliness, sort of maybe the shadow side of, my interest in sociology of how we make social connections and feel social cohesion, and how we do or don't, have a society where people feel integrated and connected to one another, which is so important for a well-functioning society. One of ways of looking at sort of the distress that we have now is that we don't have that integration. We have a lot of fragmentation. And so this possibility that more people or so many people are experiencing this sense of missing something, the sense of not feeling connected, which I think is one way of conceptualizing loneliness. Wanted to know what is going on, like why is that the case? And so we don't know a lot. Some of the things we know, or some of the research is suggesting that loneliness has a significant impact on our physical health. And one reason that it's been connected to sort of the field of public health, that we, I don't have the exact figures, but a number of years perhaps are lost, for life expectancy, because when people do feel lonely or have that chronic experience of loneliness. So it does have an impact on physical well-being, certainly on emotional well-being. And in an era where we tend to think that we're highly connected, right? Social media, the social network. Why is it that it seems to be more of a problem, that we maybe feel alienated or we feel isolated, we feel alone? I think that's a huge and very interesting question. I wanted to learn more about it. I'll say a couple of things, other things. One is that I think our commonly held notion is that when we get older, we get lonely, right? Because we experience a set of losses. We outlive our spouse perhaps, or our friends. And so we lose people, and therefore we, must be lonely because we've have so much loss of social relationships. Well, interestingly, some compelling research suggests that it's not people who are older, 65 or so, that have the highest levels of loneliness. It's actually younger people. It's people of traditional college age that are more likely than any other age group to feel lonely. And since we serve people of all different ages, but still a large chunk of our population are those traditional age students, are those students who are vulnerable, if you will, to feelings of loneliness and the consequences. I want to know more about that and see what best practices there might be in terms of thinking about ameliorating loneliness, perhaps preventing, understanding on our campus. And that's part of what I'm going to do in my sabbatical, and also figure out ways to engage my students so that my students can start to help answer some of those questions also.
And I would think that some feelings of loneliness would be amplified in this time of COVID now, where we are physically isolated from one another. And that was not the original intent, of course. But,
yeah, but I think there's an extra urgency, if you will, to understand and think about it now. And I think, I think there's even more questions, for us to look at, but certainly very, very important. Maybe one of the outcomes of the isolation that we're feeling now is to eventually identify strategies that help us be resilient, and that people have developed to combat loneliness, among other things. So it's a rich time, a challenging time, but out of this, I think we will learn a lot.
And I'm wondering too, if you think it's possible for an individual to feel a sense of loneliness as a single individual apart from others, as well as feeling a sense of loneliness even though they're with a group of like-minded people. You mentioned social media, and you would think we're all well connected, but I think that's also accelerated everybody's desire to find similar thinking people or groups, affinity groups. So is it possible to feel alone even if you're with a group?
That's a great question. I think it's a paradox, right? I think the answer is it certainly is possible, and I think the pain of loneliness might be even greater to be alone and with people, right? Because there you are, you're supposed to, right? You haven't. I think part of loneliness is an expectation, right? As to the nature of connections, or how many connections, or what you need to feel connected, and a sense of that not being met, right? And so if you're with people, or you're doing various possibilities of connecting, Facebook and other, Snapchat, all these other ways of sharing information and stories, and the pressure that goes with that.
Right.
So we might think, well, you're supposed to feel connected because you're interacting with so many people. But if it's not somehow meeting a kind of need that you have for that connection, it's not quantity of connection, right? It's quality as well too. And so you can be with a lot of people and not making a qualitative kind of connection, and feel lonely, and probably feel even worse than if you were actually with, by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I guess just sort of one final question is, do you foresee that some of your work could lead to the development of a new course, or perhaps several courses that could be offered at the college in studying individualism or loneliness, or however you define it?
Yeah. Oh, I would just love that. I could imagine, for sure, that there would be room there. And you remind me, as I was developing a sabbatical proposal, I looked through the textbooks that are used in, the popular textbooks, in like an introductory sociology course, the most popular public health textbook, which we happen to use at this college too. And there's no mention of loneliness in any of those textbooks. So there's no material looking at loneliness. So I think that's an area, where I can, I hope to make a contribution in terms of putting together some course content, and perhaps, yeah, expanding that into maybe an interdisciplinary kind of approach.
Good. Well, I hope then maybe in several months we can record a follow-up episode to this
I would
show,
love
and we can learn about what you've learned during your sabbatical.
Thank you. I would
So I'd
love
like to thank you, Dr. Rebecca Loew, Professor of Social and Behavioral Sciences at Middlesex Community College, for joining us. And I'd like to thank all of you who are listening to Middlesex Moments for joining us for another edition of our show. As always, you're welcome to visit us in person at our main campus at 100 Training Hill Road in Middletown. And if you do visit us, remember to bring your mask and to stay socially distant from others around you. You can also visit us at our Meriden Center, located at Platt High School, where we offer afternoon and evening classes 4 days a week. And you can certainly visit us online 24/7 at mxcc.edu. For everyone at Middlesex Community College, I'm Steve Minkler. Please be safe and be well.